Before the empires, before the victories, before the crown, there was simply a boy, born far from the centers of influence, far from the palaces, far from the people who shaped the world. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in Corsica in 1769, only a year after France had taken control of the island. It was a place caught between identities, neither fully French nor fully independent, a place of uncertainty, and uncertainty has a strange relationship with power. As a child, Napoleon was never admired. He was mocked. His accent was different. His background was foreign. He arrived in France as an outsider, and outsiders often learn something others never do. They learn to observe, they learn to adapt, and eventually they become obsessed with proving themselves. While others chase status, Napoleon chased understanding. He studied campaigns, leaders, empires, victories, failures. He wanted to understand something deeper. Why do people obey? Why do they follow? Why does one individual rise while thousands remain forgotten? He was not born powerful, but he was becoming a student of power. Then history intervened. The French Revolution shattered the old order. Kings lost authority, institutions collapsed, certainty disappeared, and for the first time, power was no longer inherited. It was available to anyone capable of taking it. And where most people saw chaos, Napoleon saw the opportunity. Power rarely introduces itself with a crown. It begins with something far less glamorous: competence. Before, men followed Napoleon because of his name, they followed him because he kept on delivering results. France was no longer just divided, it was also unstable. The revolution had dismantled the old order, but it had not yet built a new one. Across the country, uncertainty became the only certainty. In times like these, talent is noticed, but competence becomes essential. Napoleon's first opportunity arrived in 1793. The port of Toulon had fallen into the hands of royalists and their British allies. For the young republic, losing it meant more than surrendering a city. Now, at the time, Napoleon was not the highest ranking officer. He wasn't the most experienced one. But while others focused on the city, he focused on the harbor. He understood something remarkably simple: control the guns overlooking the port, and the enemy fleet could no longer remain. The plan worked. Toulon fell, and almost overnight, an obscure artillery officer became one of Republic's brightest young generals. This wasn't luck. It was the first time Napoleon transformed understanding into authority. Competence had earned Napoleon recognition, but recognition alone does not change history. For that, a man must become larger than himself. In 1796, Napoleon was given the command of the army of Italy. It was hardly considered France's finest force, poorly supplied, poorly paid, and expected to achieve very little. Years of war had left them hungry, unpaid, and forgotten. He understood a truth that would define his rise. Power rarely begins by commanding people, it begins by changing what they believe. Most generals inherit soldiers, but Napoleon inherited doubt. And doubt became his first enemy. Now he could not magically fill their stomachs, replace their worn out equipment, or give them overwhelming numbers. So he offered them something no supply wagon could deliver: a future, a future filled with wealth, honor, and the opportunity to build lives greater than the ones they had been forced to endure. For the first time, the ambitions of one man had become the ambitions of an entire army, and history has shown that an army convinced that it can win is often far more dangerous than the one that is merely larger. Now, Napoleon was ready to test that belief. But belief alone does not win wars. Waiting for Napoleon were two armies: to the east, Austria, and to the west, the kingdom of Sardinia Piedmont. Together, they outnumbered the French, and if they united, the campaign would likely end before it had truly begun. To almost any commander, the conclusion was obvious: to prepare for both armies. But Napoleon rejected the obvious. He understood something that others did not. The enemy was not two armies, the enemy was time. He understood that if Austrians and the Sardinians were to fight together, then France would almost certainly lose. But if they could be separated, then two impossible battles could become two possible ones. Power often belongs to the person who refuses to fight the battle everyone else sees. Instead, they change the battlefield itself. Napoleon never planned to defeat two armies. He just made sure they never become one. If the enemy was time, then speed would become his greatest weapon to destroy them. He first had to prevent them from ever fighting together. And so his first target became Montenot, a small mountain village nestled within the Ligurian Apennines of northern Italy. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about it: a few narrow roads, steep ridges, dense forests, a place most commanders would have marched straight past. But Napoleon saw something different. He saw the point where the Austrian army was the most exposed and most isolated from its Sardinian ally. The mountains that seemed to protect the coalition were the very thing preventing it from fighting as one, rather than attacking across the entire front. Napoleon gathered thousands of French soldiers into a single striking force. The French attacked. The Austrians fought fiercely, but they were fighting alone. The Sardinians never arrived in time. Napoleon hadn't defeated the coalition, but he had defeated the coalition's ability to become one. Montenot lasted only a day, but in that single day, Napoleon proved that his understanding of power works. And this was only the beginning.